There's no end to the K-menace in Canada. The Khalistan mob has now made the Hindu festival of Diwali its latest target. On the 12th of November, Khalistanis disrupted the Diwali celebrations of Indians in Mississauga city of Canada. Videos have surfaced on social media showing how Khalistani radicals were raising pro-Khalistan slogans and pelting trash as well as stones at the Indians celebrating Diwali. This comes as tensions simmer between India and Canada over action on Khalistan. This anti-India hate has led to serious safety concerns for Indians living in Canada. Last week, an Indian-origin man along with his 12-year-old son were killed in a targeted shooting in Canada's South Edmonton. The police has released the images and videos of the suspects. The probe is also on. And coming back to the increased Khalistan activity in Canada, sample this. Khalistan radicals were cornered by a Sikh family outside a Gurudwara in Canada. The Sikh family stood up to the mob and snatched the Tiranga from them. The mob then heckled and abused the family. A question that arises now is that for how long will Justin Trudeau allow this free run to K-radicals?
कनेडियन सरकार से पूछना चाहता हूं, क्या ये जो लोग तिरंगे की हिफाजत के लिए खड़े थे और जिस तरह से इनके साथ बदतमीजी की गई, इनके साथ मारपीट की गई, हाथापाई की गई, क्या ये कनाडा के वासी नहीं है? ये आपको कनाडा के वासी केवल वही दिखते हैं जो लड़ाई झगड़ा और आतंक फैलाने का नाम ले रहे हैं। कैनेडियन गवर्नमेंट एक बड़ी साजिश के तहत जैसे गोरों ने किया था, बांटो और राज करो, इसी तरह से कर रही है। हमारे भारतीयों के बीच के अंदर नफरत की खाई बढ़ा रही है और आपस में लोगों को लड़ा रही है।
Now, this comes just a day after India talked tough and showed the mirror to Canada at the United Nations. During the review of Canada's human rights record at the UNHRC, India asked Ottawa to stop the misuse of freedom of expression to incite violence and take steps to disallow activities of groups which are promoting extremism.
In the spirit of constructive dialogue, India recommends the following to Canada. 1. Further strengthen the domestic framework to prevent misuse of freedom of expression for inciting violence and disallow activities of groups which are promoting extremism. 2. Effectively prevent attacks on places of worship of religious and racial minorities, strengthen legislative and other measures to address hate crimes and hate speech. 3. Put an end to structural discrimination against children belonging to indigenous groups and address disparities in access to services by all children.
Now remember, India and Canada's ties have been in deep freeze ever since Trudeau leveled allegations of possible Indian agents' involvement in the killing of Khalistan terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Trudeau has failed to provide evidence to back up his charges and continues to repeat the allegations. On Sunday, he did that again. Listen in.
We have been very, very clear that we want to work constructively with India on this very serious matter. From the very beginning, we shared the real allegations that we are deeply, deeply concerned about, but we have reached out to the Indian government and to partners around the world to get to the bottom of this, to take it seriously.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
We take this across to our guest joining us. Puneet Sahni is expert on the evolution of the Sikh identity and expert also on Khalistan terror. With us also is Terry Milewski, author of Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. Daniel Boardman is a Canadian journalist joining us. And I want to start with you first, Daniel. You know, the very statement of Mr. Trudeau is riddled with oxymorons and contradictions. What, for instance, is a real allegation is something that I just can't wrap my head around. It's either the truth or an allegation.
Well, that's because you're unused to Trudeau speak. If you had done 8 years of proper Trudeau learning and talking, you would know that this is just standard nonsense. Yes, this is real allegations that are credible to this. The language is intentionally obtuse. He gets away with it because he has a friendly media. And is there something of substance here? Maybe. I would be more likely to believe him if I was shown any evidence, not just, we think there might be some links here. But, he's allowing the country to spiral out of control on nearly every element. There's violence in the streets. There's mobs attacking Jews. There's Khalistanis attacking everyone who celebrates Diwali. He's letting this maliciously be framed as Sikhs versus Hindus, which it's not. I mean, Hindus are not the only ones to celebrate Diwali. But his partner in crime, Jagmeet Singh, is in on this too, trying to distance the Sikh community from Diwali, trying to paint this as ethnic tension. There's Hindu temples were blocked off on Navratri by Khalistanis and Islamists. They are attacked here on Diwali. The streets of Canada are absolute chaos because there is no adults in charge. There's no will to stop any of this from the establishment. And if anything, they're fanning the flames of all of this while going on and lecturing the world on diversity, equity, and inclusion, when in our own cities, it's chaos. It's absolute chaos.
Absolutely. And in fact, let me bring in Puneet Sahni on that. Puneet, at the end of the day, we haven't seen anything like this in any part of the world, perhaps, where you have such a free run given to people who are professing a very violent ideology. They've threatened to attack Indian diplomats. We've seen various protests, in fact, go out of hand. And now we're looking at a situation where entire festivals have become targets. Now, there's nothing more shocking than this, is there?
So, Namaste, Madhav. Actually, there is a lot more shocking. But the thing is, you have to be kind of like Terry or like me, who have basically become obsessed with this. So, for example, now you become, outraged that they are, stomping on the Indian flag in a Gurdwara. But if you go back in history, like 40 years back, they would barge into the Indian missions and on the Independence Day, burn the flag. So the thing is, and again, I want people to understand that this Khalistanis, they are like Hamas. No amount of, if you concede or if you argue with them, they only become emboldened because they are not for reconciliation. They are for amplifying the wounds. 300,000 Sikhs were killed, collect the wounds, and they are nihilist. To give you, a very, pertinent example, when you say festival. So the community is completely against it. So I will actually upload it. Somebody just sent me in Brampton, where they run the roofs. There was a Diwali Mela. There was no Bandi Chhod Mera what they're saying nonsense. And the city said, this is a festival of the Sikhs. And an ocean of Sikhs were there. And Malkeet Singh, you are of my generation. You would have heard, he was there. So again, but what do you do with these criminal elements? And these criminal elements, you have to understand, they understand only deterrence. I'll make one small point. For example, Terry, they were asking, you declare this genocide, that what happened in 1984. And they were saying, they were very sinister. What they wanted was to declare it a genocide so they can whitewash, the killings that they did, many order of more in Punjab. And when Jagmeet Singh was confronted by Terry Muleski, he was saying again and again, Jagmeet Singh, that I wanted to call it a genocide because I wanted to put the blame on the government. Hindus have not done anything. Hindus have actually defended the Sikhs. And there is no history of Hindu-Sikh conflict. And what happened, what Daniel just pointed, once they got this genocide, outside the, the biggest temple, they are putting this huge vans that, Hindus have killed Sikhs, Hindus have burned infants or something like that. So if you go out of the way for reconciliation or concession, they are going to use that against you because they want hate, they want conflict, they want annihilation.
Absolutely.
And the Indian government has to understand and they have to set deterrent because Canada is not going to do, it's okay. We can't do anything about it. But thousands of people are going to die if this fire burns again in Punjab, and we have to set the deterrent.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's where things become extremely complicated. And certainly, of course, why should anyone be allowed to get away with propagating violence? Let me bring in Terry on that. Terry, one can put out whatever propaganda one wants to. It's any person's decision whether they want to believe that or not. The problem comes in when you threaten violence, when you threaten diplomats, for instance, will be acted upon, when you start attacking festivals. And that's what's really shocking. Which pluralistic country, and Canada prides itself on being a liberal democracy, can tolerate this kind of attack taking place on one religion's festival?
Well, Canada's certainly been testing the limits, hasn't it? I think there is a distinction to be made here that everyone needs to understand, I think, especially if you want India to win this fight with Canada. India needs to adopt a winning strategy by making the distinction between problems of free speech, where, let's say you're talking about somebody waving a yellow flag and going down the street shouting Khalistan Zindabad. In Canada, it's that's considered free speech, plain and simple. There's no incitement of violence there. However, it's when you cross the line, and India, by the way, does object to all kinds of things that we consider just plain free speech that don't involve inciting violence. It's when you cross the line into...
Do you say the Diwali protest, where the stone pelting happened, doesn't cross the line?
Whoa. I'm not making that argument at all. Throwing stones is crossing the line. That's violence.
Right.
I understand the distinction, and the point I'm making to you is that I think that India can do more to understand the distinction and go where they're likely to win the argument, not where they're going to lose. No Western democracy is going to abolish free speech. They're going to stick to it, but it's how you define that. Does it include putting up glorification martyr posters of the Air India bomber, the worst mass murderer in Canadian history? Obviously not. Does it include killer posters calling Indian diplomats killers and offering cash rewards for their home addresses so that if somebody wants to get them, they know where to go? Does it include parading through the streets of Brampton, Ontario with a diorama illustrating and celebrating the assassination of Indira Gandhi in 1984? No, it does not. What I'm saying is that there's a whole lot going on that has been normalized in Canada for many years, going back 40 years to the Air India bombing, the Kanishka bombing of 1985. There's a whole lot going on that does cross the line, and I would like to see the Indian side of this debate focus where they're likely to win the debate, with the hearts and minds of Canadians and Indians who can recognize this distinction. But just saying, why doesn't Canada stop people yelling at each other? Well, what are the police supposed to do with that?
That's fine. I understand your point. But I understand your point. The problem, Terry, is that you have a situation where, the two governments' diplomatic ties are perhaps at their worst ever. Once, of course, very close friends. But the real question is that how can you go on making allegations about what is alleged to be action by Indian agents without presenting any evidence? There's still allegations at the end of the day.
I think this is another area where sometimes the Indians go a little bit farther than the facts will take them. For example, we know that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is a pretty tough character, a very experienced man. It's extremely unlikely. I would say the possibility is vanishingly remote that he went into that frosty meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau at the G20 in New Delhi in September. And that he asked no questions. He didn't say to Trudeau, what are you talking about? What is your evidence? Of course he asked that question. Of course he demanded to know what Trudeau was talking about. Secondly, I find it impossible to believe that Mr. Modi, of all people, would call Canada's charges absurd if he didn't know what they were. I mean, of course he knew what they were.
Puneet, would you like to respond to that? Puneet, would you like to respond to that? Because we certainly still aren't the wiser as to what exactly these allegations are and what the evidence is to back up these claims.
So, Madhav, actually, so the thing is, when you speak against these people, these are really vindictive and it's putting your life on the line, right? So I basically focus myself where there is a more reward for it, like bringing facts on Sikh history that nobody does. But actually, I have a very good idea who killed Nijjar. And so does everybody who basically lives in Surrey. So, and this is again, for example, I tell you, I challenge, I have a lot of credibility. I've been speaking for 2 years and I've not got one thing wrong. So for example, Nijjar actually had a gun when he was killed. The CSIS has actually, and RCMP have not released it. And that gun was illegal. I challenge them to do it. So the people in the Gurdwara and, who are involved in it, they have a very, very good idea who basically killed Nijjar. And from the police, and it is so shameful that people are reaching out to me, that I speak, that people have no confidence in the Canadian police, that they have been infiltrated by Khalistani. If we go, that we will be, got after. Before
we leave our viewers, let me quickly get in a word from Daniel. Daniel, this lack of action by authorities, this is something that repeats itself. I'm quoting Carolyn Parrish, who's the Mississauga City Councillor. She says, quote, disgusting lack of preparedness, extremely poor response by Peel Regional Police, local community police station did nothing, major disappointment all around. And it's the same thing that Puneet is just referring to.
Yeah, I mean, look at the board of the Peel Region Police and look at the higher-ups there, and you'll start to get some answers on there. But this is all across the board. And there's many problems, right, in Canada. And, I totally agree with Terry's point on the framing of this from the counter side of, listen, this isn't a problem with freedom of speech. This is a problem that Canada's not enforcing the laws on the books. It's illegal to blow up an airplane. It's illegal to threaten to blow up an airplane. It already is, right? And when we frame this as, oh, free speech on this and that, is it going too far? This has nothing to do with free speech. This is incitement to literal terrorism. We have Panoon running around threatening to blow up airplanes. And Puneet's point that these guys are like Hamas, that's what they say. After October 7th, on October 8th, 9th, or 10th, or whatever, Panoon and the Sikhs for Justice put out a video saying, we love October 7th, this is what Khalistan should be, and this is what we should do to India.
Well, that should have
These
been
are who these people are. These are legitimate.
That should have triggered a warning. That should have set alarm bells off. Unfortunately, Daniel, that's not what's happened. We're also completely out of time. But we certainly hope that whatever administration apathy, administrative inaction, whatever you want to call it, we certainly hope that ends, because we cannot have this kind of violence of people running around the streets of Canada to be repeated again. And certainly we wouldn't want this to at any level spiral into something bigger than it already is. Puneet Sahni, Terry Milewski, Daniel Broadbent, thanks so much for joining us this evening.